All right, I'll call this meeting to order at 6:30. Roll call, please.
Taylor. Woken.
Here.
Young.
Here.
Ingram.
Present.
Rector.
Here.
Summers.
Here.
Tinsley. Harper.
Here. We have a quorum present. Approval of the addenda. So moved by Ms. Taylor. Is there a second? By Mike Ingram. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Next item is the approval of the minutes from February 4th. So moved by Ms. Taylor again. Is there a second? Mr. Rector?
I second, but I have one change
Okay.
or correction. Page 3, Captain Vogus. Vogus is Voges. About the fifth line down.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. Any other discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Tinsley just arrived, so. Next, we'll move to public participation. We have several tonight. You have 5 minutes. And the first one up is Dottie Vera Weiss.
Good evening, and it's good to see many of you again. I'm here with a group of concerned community members, and many of us have been involved in the past with either CUCPJ, the Champaign-Urbana Citizens for Peace and Justice, or BPNJ, the Build Programs Not Jails group, for most of the past decade, trying to address community justice, mass incarceration, and racial justice issues. We were here when the Institute for Law and Policy Planning was contracted and then made their report, and also when the Community Justice Task Force did so. And when the proposal was made by Gorski, Reifsteck, and Kimmy on jail building, and then the Racial Justice Task Force. And each of those documents has useful information that I encourage you to review, and we've included some of information from those documents in what we're going to talk about this evening. We recognize the challenges that the county faces with our infrastructure and finances, and at the same time recognize the many unmet needs in the community. And we're coming together again to try to address these problems and to work with you on them to find good solutions. Solutions that look not only at the finances and the mandates to the county, but also at the people of our community. The proposals that we're going to bring will represent a third way between, on the one hand, inaction, including inaction on the downtown jail, which needs attention, and action towards an unfeasible and unsustainable multi-million-dollar jail building project. The recommendations here are data-driven, strategic, sustainable, and in line with the core values of civil rights and fiscal responsibility. They're aimed at producing a significant win for the county by saving taxpayers money while improving conditions at the jail and in the county as a whole. Back in 2013, ILPP made a report that contained the following caution: that there is a, quote, commonly held misconception that the growth of the jail, that the growth of the county population, crime, and adult arrests determine the jail populations of the future. While these factors do have influence, they are much weaker drivers of jail population than is represented. Unfortunately, these methods shift responsibility for jail inmate population growth to factors that are mostly beyond the control of local officials. And that gives a sense of why bother? Because we just have to deal whatever comes our way. But it goes on to say, in actuality, the number of admissions to the jail and the length of inmate stays will determine the size and character of the future inmate population. These two variables are primarily the product of local justice policy and practice. They're the result of decisions made by local officials at key justice system points, decision points. The current jail proposal, okay, I didn't mention that back in 2016, there was a facilities action plan that was put together by the staff here. And it said it seeks to achieve the following goals: address critical infrastructure problems, restore buildings to maintainable condition, fulfill unmet human service needs, reduce the maintained space by 27%, and make the county debt-free by 2028. By spending millions building onto the satellite jail, which is likely only possible through bond authority, you dig the county further into debt and deferred maintenance. On page 4 of the Facilities Action Plan, it reads, existing county debt service is projected to decline beginning in 2025, and all extant bonds should be retired by the end of 2028. At that point, the county would be debt-free, and revenues previously dedicated to satisfying debt service would become available for possible reallocation to programs, if you follow their recommendations. It goes on, this implies that we should pursue a medium-term plan for facilities provisioning that establishes a bridge to the future and avoids excessively large investments that may not provide value in the future. Changing demographics suggests that capital expenditures in facilities should be made with a conservative philosophy. Where possible, flexibility should be sought to accommodate evolving needs that may not be readily apparent at the present time. In order to maximize available funding, the following principles should guide selection and prioritization of facilities projects. 1, reduce space utilization by consolidation or elimination of inefficient or underutilized offices. 2, construct, renovate, or remodel facilities only to the extent that it is absolutely necessary to serve current requirements. And 3, address deferred maintenance issues in existing facilities to prevent further deterioration of the physical plant. Thank you. And continuing.
Thank you. Next is Danielle Chenoweth.
Good evening. I know you have a difficult project before us, and first off, I just want to say you're not alone. So you have a broad base of experts in criminal justice in this community. Some of them are in the audience today. We've worked on this issue for over a decade. I personally have led prison phone justice reform at the state and national level. It should be considered an asset that you have deep community engagement and partnership on this issue. And the fact of the matter is any major expenditure is going to require honest, attentive community engagement. So I just want to encourage you to come with that piece, and I've definitely seen some of that from the county board. Together, we have to articulate a way forward on the jail that addresses root causes. It meets the needs of both those locked up and the employees. It anticipates policy changes that are coming down the pipeline and is financially realistic. So I just want to start with where we're unified. We're unified on those 4 things. So I want to explain, because you might feel alarmed that you're receiving pushback on this. On October 7th, you, the Facilities Committee, voted unanimously to move forward with jail consolidation, and the figure presented in September was over $47 million. So I just want you to understand that the last time we heard on this issue was with that facilities action report that's in front of you, and we've outlined some pieces that we think you should take a look at. What it said in that report, last time we heard from you, is they were proposing a new version of the proposal that reduces the cost by 40%. And they said, based on changes that have that have produced significant reductions in the corrections population. This is the county administration said they could reduce the footprint of the expansion with a construction range of 10 to 13 million. That's in your document. So that is the proposal that went to the public, and that's a fourth of what you are considering now, and it lost by 70-30, right? So at that point, we assumed that the county would take a different approach and do a use what you have approach, right? And we were interested and still are interested to sit at the table with you to look at what that could look like. I want to make clear this is not a personal issue, and that I supported the sheriff in the race, and I continue to support him in this effort. I think it's a very difficult situation to be in. So the county has a long and unfortunate history of overbuilding facilities only to have them stay vacant. This is another part of the pushback. So the juvenile detention center, half full, and has from the beginning. New nursing home, overbuilt, cost runs, the county struggled to fill it. The old Ilias building, 100,000 square feet, largely empty for years. Downtown jail can hold 131 people, usually has 40. Brookins, your own facilities action plan says, and this is in the document, that maintaining a 93,000 square foot building to house 72 county employees does not make financial sense. It says that this employee group could fit within 20,000 square feet, right? And that if you were to sell Brookins, you would avoid a deferred maintenance of nearly $5 million. This is your own words. I'm just helping to remind us of some of this history. So you are facing serious difficulties, as I know you know, in the maintenance of your facilities. Your Bailey-Edwards report of 2015 stated on page 10 that the condition of the properties was poor and that you had $25 million in deferred maintenance. That was 5 years ago, right? So you have $5.6 million that you have to invest just to stay afloat and not get further behind. But this project actually expands the footprint of your facilities, of the jail by 74%, from 32,000 to 55.6 thousand square feet. More utilities, more maintenance costs, you're going to get further behind. So from a community's perspective, we've seen this go from 8 million to 24 to 29 to 37.6 in 2015 to 37 Kimmy to 47 Rifestack, right? And now we're looking at 52.9 million with the transitional funds. So you shouldn't be surprised that we're sitting here having this conversation, because in those 8 years, you reduced the population by 32%, and we're looking at additional reductions going forward. So I'm going to pass this to Jane McClintock, who's going to show a little bit about population projections. Thank you.
McClintock.
Like that, thank you. All right, I'm passing out some charts that I think will help to illustrate the population changes that have occurred since the Rifestack report, the Rifestack analysis, and also what we can expect coming in the next few years with bail bond reforms on the state level. On the page with one graph, we can see that the analysis from the Rifestack report, which is what occurred in 2015, was published, and it's an analysis from 2010 to 2014. And if anybody wants to see these charts, they're over there on the little table. And so you can see that reduction of 30% and what an effect it has had on the comparison of daily jail population to the number of beds in the jails. On the left, you see Rifestack report, and you can see a line that indicates the total beds in both jails. And then bringing that along, you can see that line of total beds, we don't even approach it between 2016 and 2019. We don't even come close. In fact, we're only occasionally over the total capacity of the satellite jail. And if we had paid to move everybody to out of county during 2018 and 2017 and 2018 to other counties that were over the number of beds in the satellite jail, it would have cost, on average, about $120,000. If we had moved everybody over the ideal functional capacity, it would have cost, on average, per year, $1 million, which is significant. But if you turn over the piece of paper, you can see that if we anticipate bail bond reform, we can see that we're well under the capacity of the satellite jail, just anticipating a modest bail bond reform based on who's in jail. Like in the last few months, we took some samples and we saw, based on who had a bail amount of $2,500 or less, if those people were out of jail, so people with modest amounts, what percentage of the people, and this is what Ron Kester has come and talked to you about, I think, at the few, so you're kind of familiar with this. So if those people had been out of jail between 2016 and 2019, as we see in the chart, and if we had closed the downtown jail, if we had had to pay to send everybody out of county every night that they were over the ideal functional capacity, it would have cost us on average $125,000 to get to ideal functional capacity, according to the Reifsteck report. The final chart is based on anticipating population if we look at the example of bail bond reform in New Jersey. When they eliminated cash bail in New Jersey, they reduced the jail population by 44%. So we might reasonably assume that we would have similar reductions. So you can see that we're at that point well under, comfortably under the ideal functional capacity of the satellite jail. And I bring these numbers up. And I should say a little bit about myself. I'm a graduate from the master's program in architecture at the U of I, and have been a builder for 10 years. So when I saw the proposal, and I was, for reasons that Danielle has brought up, I was surprised by the figure. And I was like, isn't there a better way? So I looked at the Reifsteck report and wanted to kind of update that analysis and see if we could reconsider together whether this is the right way to look at the problem. So in conclusion, I guess I just want to point out that the analysis that has formed the basis of the current plan is out of date and seeks to design a jail for 5 years ago, much less today, and much less 5 years from now, which is when it would actually be built. So I think we need a plan that looks to the future. We need a plan that anticipates the changes that not only are going to come to Champaign-Urbana, but that we can make and lead on in our community. So thank you for your time, and with that, I'll leave to the next person. Thank you.
Hi there, everybody. Hope you're doing well this evening. At this point, I'm sure you're starting to recognize me as a familiar face. I'm pinch hitting a bit for somebody who is sick and not able to be here, and so I'm going to just be brief. But I also always feel remiss if we talk about this issue and don't bring up the issue of race. As a facilities committee, that's, you've got the social justice parts of your committee, but as you build structures, you have to look at what they're for, and I think it's not morally okay, really, to look at what you're building without why you're building it, and if you don't have any sort of discussion about who's going to go in this jail as part of a plan, then you're destined to repeat that. So we know those numbers, and we know that they're not okay. But on the facilities side of things, as it's been said before, you don't need more buildings or additions. Your facilities plans from before have shown that you're already behind on deferred maintenance and have a footprint that's too large for your financial budget to maintain. I sort of want you to take a moment to dream about why you got on to the city council, or county board, and to think about like your public service and what you imagine could be. And I know that for a long time you've felt cash strapped and unable to accomplish those things you might desire. And some of that you think is due to politics, but some of it's also due to lack of resources. And you think about investing this much money into something that's going to be draining on the whole county board for decades. You make it impossible to accomplish the things that you may have got on this city government or this county board to do. Serving people is really hard to do if you don't have the resources to do it. So don't only think about whether or not you feel like you need to do this, but think about all the other things that you dream of doing when you're on this board and in this place of service. So that's some long-term thinking. Short-term, understand that you have some humanitarian needs that need to be addressed, and I don't want to discount sort of those beliefs and that unwillingness to continue the inhumane treatment that's happening at downtown jail, and we really do want that closed and to have a short-term affordable solution to make sure that the people who are currently there are safe. I don't want that ever to be misconstrued that everybody who's there needs to be treated humanely. But I think that's a pretty, and that's fundamental basis. I think that largely they just shouldn't be there, but because jail is bad for people. But yeah, in conclusion, it's infeasible to try and build something that big. As Jane was saying, you know that this thing won't be built for years, and you know that there's a high chance that by that time there's these policy measures that are coming forth. So if you're looking at building something, you want to make sure that it's built for what the future is going to be, and we're going to know a lot of those things in the next couple legislative sessions. And I know that 2 years is a long time to wait, and that feels uncertain. But if you're going to be building something worth millions and millions of dollars, you want to be kind of certain about how high the need is, and we won't know that until the legislation comes down. And you don't want to leave yourselves with a legacy of building a jail that's never full and never needed. That makes it impossible for you to ever do any of the work that you might be serving because you actually want to do. Because I don't think a jail is inspiring to anyone. So I hope that you have a good night and take this under advisement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is it Naomi Pack? I probably messed it up, but that's not unusual.
Do I have to push this? It's on. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Or it's evening. So, my name is Naomi Peak. I am a faculty member at the University of Illinois in Asian American Studies, Gender and Women's Studies, and History. So I am also opposed to this proposed new jail. In addition to all of the reasons, the very practical reasons that people have given you around the cost, maintenance cost, the fact that you don't actually need this space, I wanted to make other kinds of arguments of what could we do with $53 million that would not go into building a jail. So I just looked it up on my phone, and the average teacher's salary for Champaign County is somewhere between, it starts around $48,000. How many teachers could we hire to educate the youth who may end up in prisons or jails later on? How many after school programs could we have? How many mental health services could we provide, right? And this is just the $53 million in terms of startup costs. As people have been telling you, it's not just the startup costs that you can't afford right now, that you have to go into debt just to build the thing, but you have maintenance costs. You can't even maintain the jail that you have right now. So what makes you think that once you get this $53 million, build this new building, that you're gonna be able to maintain it? There's no logic behind this building, right? So in addition to all of the kind of practical arguments, I'm just asking, aren't there better ways to prevent people from going to jail in the first place, right? So what kind of anti-poverty programs could we invest this $53 million startup cost, right, into, and then have that potential maintenance cost be funneled into as well, right? What about homeless services? You know, what about hunger reduction services? Things like this. There are just so many ways that we can think about using this $53 million that you don't have, right? And funneling into community development, right? And to fostering healthy, robust communities where everyone who lives here gets to actually be a part of this community, gets to contribute to it. I mean, there are so many things that we could do to facilitate people's engagement with our neighbors and with the people who live here. And so I'd really encourage you to think about what are the other things that we could do with $53 million that, again, you don't already have. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And last is Bobby Tryst.
I'm Bobby Tryst of Champaign, and I've come before this body many, many times, though I haven't been here in 2 or 3 years. But I started, the first time I addressed this body on the incarceration issue was January 31st, 2012. So, and meanwhile, I've been involved with this whole issue, including showing movies to women in the jail about once a month and being on the board of First Followers. I have 2 children who are, well, one has passed and the other is almost old, who were caught up in the criminal justice system in this county. So I've come at it from both directions. And I'm also a licensed clinical social worker. I've kept my credentials current so that I can use my skills for the betterment of the community. So we badly need something like the Bexar County Initiative in Texas, where all the services that people need are in one place, but they're not behind bars. So there's place for homeless people, people who are experiencing mental health crises, and just general problems in the community that we can't really incarcerate our way out of. And while there need to be more services for people in the jail, they don't necessarily need to be in the jail. My experience with the women that are in the jail is I would not be anxious about having any of them walk the street or come to my house. They're super appreciative of us coming in. I've never felt threatened or in danger from these prisoners, most of whom are either there because of drugs and alcohol or because they can't afford bail. And as been pointed out before with the previous speakers, the end of cash bail is on the horizon, which is going to really reduce the need for beds. And we need alternatives to bringing people who are having a mental health crisis to jail. The biggest provider of mental health services in this country are jails and prisons. Once the big warehouse mental hospitals closed, the money and the people were supposed to flow to communities. Well, the people flowed to the communities, but not the money. So if there are $47 million or $53 million, there are much better uses of it than expanding bricks and mortar. It's my understanding there are some buildings that could be utilized. I think the Time Center is underutilized. That's one possibility. But I don't think we need to build anything new. We need to reconfigure some of how the satellite jail is used. We do need to close the downtown jail as far as people living there, but it could still be used theoretically for sheriff's offices. There are many different ways to come at this problem besides building a $47 to $53 million jail with money we don't have. And if we got it, there are better ways to spend it. Thank you.
Okay, we got one more here, Marisa Natali.
Good evening. My name is Marisa Natali, and I would also like to comment in opposition to the expansion project, and I'll preface this by saying that I'm a jail librarian, mostly serving downtown, so I am fully aware of the issues in that facility and agree completely that it needs to be shut down. But I think that, as Dr. Pike pointed out, we can take a multi-pronged approach to this situation. We can close the downtown jail, and we can reduce the need for cages in our community by investing that money into other things. And so I brought along some numbers of things we could spend that money on, assuming that we have the $53 million, which we don't, but we're talking about spending it. So with that money, we could fund 1 year of opioid addiction treatment for almost 12,000 people. We could have universal pre-K for every child in Champaign-Urbana. We could build almost 300 new public housing units. We could have 152 years of food security assistance to the estimated 30,000 Champaign-Urbana residents who are living in poverty. We could cover a year of health care for 11,000 people. We could establish an emergency fund to prevent homelessness and our portion of the over 50,000 evictions that take place in Illinois each year. We could hire 124 teachers and fund their salaries for 5 years at double what they're currently making. We could double the average monthly TANF assistance for those 30,000 people for 76 years. We could fund a $2,000 college scholarship for every child in Champaign-Urbana, or a full ride to the U of I for 90 children a year for 10 years. We could fund a year of 15 hours a week of high-quality after-school programming for almost 10,000 kids. We could fund 1 year of 40 hours a week of high-quality summer programming for every child in Champaign-Urbana. We could buy back 177,000 firearms, which is probably more than currently exist in Champaign-Urbana, but I do not know. All of those things are proven by decades of research to reduce crime, to reduce poverty, to reduce the need to build more cages, and to improve the safety net and well-being of members of our community across the board. The investment in those types of programs has shown to almost double in returns what it gives back to the community, what it does for the economy, what it does for our residents, and without utilizing the easy fix of just building more prison cells. So I hope that we can look at this as an opportunity. Just as much to say no to the new jail as to imagine what that money could do for our community, and the ways in which we could use it to actually make our communities safer, because this is the easy fix, but the much more difficult fix long-term is more worthwhile and more effective for the people that you all serve. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else need to address right now? If not, I'm closing public participation, and we'll move on to communications from our board members, committee members. Go ahead, Charles.
So I just wanted to commend the people for coming out tonight. I like to think outside the box too, so I feel everything that you guys said, and I really appreciate the boldness that you guys had to come out tonight. According to some of the research data and thoughts from the participants, it sounded like and it looked like some bad decision was made in the past. I'm relatively new on this board, so but I do know, by and large, according to research, as a few of you guys mentioned about, a lot of prisons across the nation and county jail just don't work. They just simply don't work. So because, like you said, you got to go to the root cause to some of these issues. So I'm feeling, and there are other ways that you can strategically finance different projects and different ways to incarcerate people. So I'm all the way in regards of trying to make a difference instead of just loading up people and to go to the county jail, especially a lot of people of color. So I just want to commend you guys. You guys did an excellent job, and that's my 2 cents. I'm going to continue to fight for you.
Any other communications? If not, we'll move on to new business. First item is discussion satellite jail. We have the sheriff here and Carrie. Mr. Reefsteck's here, so you want to start this, or how you want to start this, Dana?
There's a document included with your packet posted on the web. Chuck Reefsteck from Reefsteck Reed is here. I'd like him to just kind of maybe walk us through the cost breakdown and how we came up with what was in the drawing.
Good evening. The document you have lists the jail priorities, which we went through back in the fall. Those really haven't, there's been one minor change to that, and that was with modifications to the satellite jail lobby. That was removed from the list of priorities. We met about a month ago with members of the county to look at a few changes to the plan that was previously brought before you. That was to reduce the overall capacity by about 20 beds, add more single cell beds so that we would get to about 44 single cells with single beds. Stick with everything being on one tier. We looked at a couple of options of that and eventually landed on the drawing that you have a copy of. And then we've asked Gil Bain again to update costs. Now, besides some of those reductions, some things were also added to the cost estimate. One, in the previous scheme, the overall square footage of the addition, we mentioned we had some dorm space in that, 16 beds of dorm, and those now switched to single bed cells. So that actually added some square footage to the facility. We were also asked to break out the costs of jail construction separate from the law enforcement portion of the project. We were asked to include geothermal heating, cooling in the new jail construction, which was a line item below the bottom line in the previous cost estimate. So on that first page of that cost estimate, that breaks down all the different components of the new jail addition. And you see a column there labeled Plan ID, and that refers back to those numbers on the priority list. So if you want to look at this as a menu, in a sense, you could. If you didn't do one of those priorities, you could look at that item and see the cost associated with it. So the bottom line there on the jail construction, after escalating that out to 2022, which we're saying is about 4% per year, adding in other soft costs, trying to get to a total project cost, which is different than construction cost. So we have a jail construction cost there of a little over $37 million. On the back side of the estimate is the law enforcement portion of the project. A couple of things were added there as well. Apparently there's a need in the county to maybe relocate the county IT department. So we were asked to add 5,000 square foot to the sheriff's law enforcement offices for that. We were asked to add solar panels to the project. We simply filled the 10,000 square foot roof up with solar panels, estimating that would be, I can give you a KVA here in a second. Oh yeah, 170, there it is, 170 kV. Again, adding in the escalation and soft costs, and we're at about $11.1 million for the law enforcement portion of it. So again, some things were reduced, some things were added, and the overall cost is roughly the same as it was back in the fall. Happy to answer questions.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, any questions for Chuck right now? Go ahead, Mike.
I don't know if it's necessarily for him. So the IT that was added, which looks to be about 7 million on this. Am I misremembering? Did we talk about this at the?
IT came up in our meeting with Chuck, the sheriff, county executive. IT needs to relocate out of this building, and for planning purposes, see what it would cost. Wanted to see what it would cost to put in there. It's a perfect location inside the sheriff's building. Would fold over with all of their needs as well, and give them a good permanent location on this complex.
Cool. So it's mostly just to see what it would cost. Okay. Because it's a lot. Sorry, you're correct. I was reading the wrong line. 1.2 million, not 7.
Anything else for Chuck at this time? You go ahead, Mr. McGuire.
That's red. Am I live?
I think so.
Thank you. A lot of discussion about closing the downtown jail and not moving those beds to the satellite jail. How much has the delay been since and how much has it cost for the delay of not doing the additions to the satellite jail from the last price that you gave us a few years ago cost us? Am I making myself clear in that?
Yeah, you are.
Just an estimate.
You are. Well, it's 4% per year, and that compounds, obviously. And I don't remember what those numbers were from 5 years ago. But when we got back on board last fall, there were some minor scope changes from what we had shown you then versus last fall. But primarily, all that cost increase was just in the escalation, just in the 4% or whatever it's been per year since that 5 years ago.
Right. As I remember, it was about $30 million before, and now we're up to $50 million. I think this plan is 40
Yeah,
something.
47, 48, I believe. Yep, 48.
Do you have any idea if the sheriff's office itself stayed at the downtown jail, what it would cost to rebuild that building, put roofs on it, or does Dana?
I think we developed some cost estimates back in when we were originally engaged, and and presented those to either the facilities committee or the
Right.
board. I don't remember which. And at that point, the costs were big enough that we decided we ought to abandon that facility. So again, I don't have that information with me. We would have developed some costs back then.
As I remember, millions of dollars to do that.
Yeah,
to,
correct.
To stay in that
It was
building.
significant, right?
Right. So we're talking a lot of money to try to maintain the sheriff at that point.
Correct.
So the sheriff has to go somewhere if we close that building. He can't stay where he's at.
Correct. And he doesn't have enough space
Right.
there really either
Right.
to do what he needs to do. Right.
Right. So we need more beds, classification issue, and we need more space. And how long do you think it would take for us to add those facilities and to move those beds to the satellite? Would this process take?
So to
As an
build
estimate.
a structure,
Yeah,
okay.
as considered right now.
So you'd probably have maybe close to a year in design efforts, maybe close to 2 years in construction. Some of that would depend on phasing because you might have to build some of the new cells before you could do some of the renovations in the existing pods that need to be done. So there'd be some phasing effort that hasn't been completely worked out, hasn't been worked out at all. But I would think about a 2-year period for all that would be about right. So 3 years after you said go.
Right. Which we wouldn't be able to go before November or something
Right.
like that. We wouldn't start this until next year.
Mhm.
And any other cost increases because of the construction here could make these prices even higher.
Sure, but that's the schedule we anticipated, and we'd escalated in these estimates the prices out to 2022,
Yeah.
which would be kind of the midpoint of construction.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Every report we've gotten is to abandon the downtown facility. You could remodel all you want to, but you still can't improve your sight lines as far as liability issues, safety of the inmates and our staff. I mean, that building just won't meet standards at today's standards. So I just want to put that out there. Did you have something you want to say, Mike?
Couple things. One, I mean, I guess I take the point that the longer we wait on this, the more expensive it gets. But I don't take that to be as a definitive point as I think my colleague does. I think it's just another indication of how massively expensive this would have been at some point and still will be at any. I mean, like, this is a gigantic project that, I mean, even as we asked for a lower price point, basically. We asked to see what it would look like if we changed a couple of things and somehow other things got added to it and the price point is still the same. And and then we have people that are coming here showing us our own facility plan, dated 4 years ago, that laid out things that we need to do that are very contrary to that. I wasn't on the board then, but I think a couple people in this room were. And I mean, we're talking about the amount of backlog we have on deferred maintenance and not being able to pay for that right now. I mean, like, that's a pretty compelling argument to me as somebody who sits here and listens to us all talk about how we don't have money for anything and how the voters are certainly not going to. They've disapproved of this idea once and probably will again if we try to ask for much. And I think it's great when we have people that actually come here with outside the box thinking to tell us, maybe we're doing this the wrong way and maybe we should be looking at something different. And this is no knock to you, of course. I think you're doing a great job with what we're asking you to do. I think we're asking you to do to look at this the wrong way. I'm sitting here thinking, like, okay, how do we have this much empty space and our own plans telling us that we should possibly be looking at using it for different things, and we're all just pretending that doesn't exist, that we're not actually saying that people haven't in our seats before us said these things. Maybe I'm the only one that's a little confused by all this right now, but I'm listening to Mr. McGuire down here talk about us needing more beds, which I don't think we have any. We don't have any evidence based around that, especially when we're looking at the things that are already changing, and then the evidence that was just presented to us in a pretty compelling chart. I don't know. If anybody else wants to tell me that I'm the crazy one here, I'm certainly welcome to hear it, but I, I don't know why we're not looking at trying to find a way to utilize space that we already have to do some of the things that we're talking about doing here. And
I'm going to disagree a little bit with you, Mike. I don't think we have the space. If you've taken tours of the facilities, the satellite jail, the storage rooms are now offices. I've been here 7.5 years now. I was here when the ILPP report came out. The first thing, and when he did the draft presentation, was strictly the board that night, Mr. Kalmanoff. And he applauded the county for 3 things we were doing that he already put in his plan, as far as assessments, what the sheriff and the state's attorney and the presiding judge were doing. But we know we have to get rid of the downtown facility.